the head coach at Notre Dame. You are 305 and 149 for your 33-year career at one of the best universities in the country. You've been to the NCAA Final Four twice, 2010, 2014. And I guess, Kevin, what goes through your mind? That's the ultimate goal? Is that the sort of the process that you start with every year before you go to the next season?
I'm not really focused on that end goal of that last win as much as the process of how you end up there. So our goals. Listen, my first goal and only goal that we state to our coaches is we want to provide the best experience in college athletics to our players. If we do that, stipulate this: did you ever play a game you didn't want to win? So I don't feel the need to have intermediate goals on winning and losing, because every single time that the whistle blows or the horn goes off, we want to win. That's a given, right? But focusing on that isn't going to get us there. Focusing on all the things that are important to getting our players there, our team there, our coaches there, that's what's important. So we just try to stay, invested in the process at every step, Greg, so that we know, we know we can get there. We've been, in the quarterfinals for 14 straight years. We're knocking on the door. So we're doing some things right, but we're obviously got some things we need to get better at too. And we'll keep focusing on how to identify those things and work at being better at them and continuing to do the things that we're doing well.
Notre Dame's always had that experience that's a little bit more unique. You travel to New York, you take your players on the road. Does the pressure, most guys graduating, even if they're All-American, don't have an opportunity to look at multi-million-dollar contracts. There's a few, but for the most part, it's not like Notre Dame football, Notre Dame basketball. Does being a sport that doesn't have that end run where money's the factor, does it make it easier to coach in college?
I think it does if you stay focused on the right things. Listen, there's never been a coach that's in this for a long time that isn't intensely competitive in terms of wins and losses and that kind of thing. But how you go about doing it and what you focus on a day-to-day basis is really the thing that defines your program and defines you as a coach and that kind of thing. To me, it's always been about developing young men. It's always been about having a program that was a meaningful, impactful, even transformative experience for the guys that became part of it. And so that's so much more than what happens between the lines every day, but it's that too. And it's what does it help them? Does it make them better men, better fathers, better professionals in the things that they do? If it doesn't, we're leaving something on the table. We're at a great university with tremendous resources to provide an experience that should help in all those areas of those kids' lives if we do it correctly. And listen, I know, we've swung and missed a lot over the years, I'm sure. And I know, you don't have that experience for every single kid, but that's the goal.
We're talking with Kevin Corrigan, the head coach at Notre Dame, the head men's lacrosse coach, and this is the second edition of Michigan Lacrosse Review. Kevin, first of all, we enjoy you. I appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. We're trying to enlighten, and part of what we're going to do with this interview is try to stay specific on various talks about recruiting. We want to talk a little bit about Notre Dame. One of the first questions I want to ask you is, what do you like best about Notre Dame? You've been there a long time.
Yeah. Obviously a place is really about the people that are there. And what's great about the people at Notre Dame and the biggest thing is that there's always been a great sense of what the mission of Notre Dame is, and what that is developing people. What that is preparing people to have a great life, to have a life of meaning and purpose and impact, and to leave Notre Dame and become something good in the communities that they go to. Somebody and who contributes positive things to the things that they're involved in, professionally, personally, in their family and everything else. And that mission is shared by everybody at Notre Dame. It really is the thing that I think makes it different. It's not a place where people look at their job as preparing you professionally for what you're doing next or whatever, although obviously, the education is tremendous. But it's more than that, and it's meant to be more than that, and everybody here tries to make it more than that.
You have alluded to and talked about fundamentally making the experience at Notre Dame, and for that matter, any university, coaches making the experience about growing men. You think sometimes the general public forgets that coaches are teachers first, for the most part?
Oh, I'm certain that they do. I don't think people have an idea of what coaches do. Heck, I didn't know. I grew up around athletics. My dad was a coach when I was a kid and everything, but I can remember asking my cousin was a women's basketball coach at the University of Virginia, and I remember asking her one time when I was in college, like, what the heck do you do all day long? I mean, do you just wait for practice, and so, if somebody with my background didn't understand it, sure as heck, most of the public doesn't understand what coaches do and where they invest their time and everything. And the fact that basically there's always something to do. You could work as much as you wanted to, because if you're doing it well, there's tremendous number of things to be done all the time. So.
Dad was a former SEC commissioner, was the athletic director at Notre Dame.
ACC now.
ACC, my mistake. Yeah, that's a huge difference. I do apologize. Does having that kind of background, I'm assuming that's got to be helpful, because there's a lot of, almost everybody in your family is involved in sports, including your son, who now is coaching with your former assistant. And I think
that's right.
You got it, the cradle of coaches. You've got a number of those guys out there coaching in different places. That's got to be got to make you feel good.
Oh, absolutely. No, listen, I grew up. It's the family business, if you will. I've got a brother who is an athletic director at NC State. I've got a brother who is producing the NBA, semifinals right now for ESPN, and we've, I think every one of my brothers has coached at some point in some way, or been involved in athletics, like administratively and that stuff. So it's just, it's something we grew up with. But really, my dad, when I was born, my dad was a coach, and he was coach till I was about 9, and then he became an athletic administrator, and so we grew up around that. We grew up around just seeing the whole thing, and you see it for what it is on the business side, with again, him being an athletic director at Virginia and Notre Dame, there's certainly a business element to it and everything else, but you also see it for what it is, for the relationships and the people that you have a chance to be a part of their lives, at an important part of their lives, and in something that's very important to them, right? You can, without losing perspective on what athletics is, you also have to recognize what a passion play it is for 18 to 22-year-old kids, and so you have this wonderful forum to operate from, because these guys are so passionately involved in what you're doing. And that, that makes it great. And I've been able to kind of see that as I grew up and see that as, through the eyes of my father and my brothers and my own experiences. And
obviously it got passed down. Talk a little bit about Will. He's a good, solid player at Notre Dame, and now he's coaching at the Division I level. And what's the dad's thoughts about son going at that level?
The biggest thing is I'm just so thrilled. He's such a nicer guy than I am, Greg. He's such a good guy, and he's a really good coach. I've watched him teach And I love the path that he took in coaching. He could have gotten right out and gone to work for somebody, coaching, college lacrosse right away. And he became a high school coach first. He wanted to see if that's what he wanted to do. And he wanted to also have the chance to really coach and kind of be in charge. And he was running some youth stuff and doing, so he was really getting involved in the game at every level. He did that for a couple of years out in Seattle. Then he became a coach at Division III level. And again, in a great university at Washington and Lee University, and great coaches down there, great people that he worked with, and now to be at Harvard with Jerry. I think it's a great path for him to develop as a coach and get his voice, find his voice as a coach. And he always had a really good understanding of the game, but to be a great coach, he needs to be a great teacher and communicator. And that's what he's, really worked hard to develop, I think. And I love the people he's worked with. He's been really fortunate that way. So I'm excited to watch him coach for the next, hopefully, 30 or 40 years.
When I asked Jerry if he gave Will or will give Will the same autonomy that Jerry had as a defensive coach at Notre Dame, I said, does he have that same carte blanche? Because, Kevin, you were really pretty good about keeping your hands off of the defensive side for the most part while Jerry was there with you for 16 years. And I asked him if that was the case. And he says, well, yeah. He says, I got to kind of let that happen. But he says, I still got to, once in a while, put my finger into it. So the follow-up question to this is that if you ever play Harvard, are you trying to schedule them in the near future?
No, I don't want to put my wife in that situation.
Okay.
We'll play them in the NCAA tournament maybe, but I'm not gonna put her in that situation between now and then.
My son is now a high school coach here in Michigan. I had to go up against him for the first time prior to the pandemic, and I beat him. But what would go through your mind? I mean, it's a hypothetical question. It's a strange discussion.
Yeah. All in all, it's not a good idea to answer hypothetical questions, Greg, but I will say, you can't worry about who's on the other sidelines. I mean, I've coached against my alma mater. I've coached against, former coaches who worked with me. I've coached against good friends, and you don't get involved with that. You're not competing against those people. It's your team, hopefully doing the best they can on any given day. And that's just where you stay focused. So I'm not sure. It wouldn't be hard on me. Like I said, it would be hard on my wife for sure. As far as I'm concerned, it would, until the game was over, it would just be another game.
When we sail in the summertime, we've got quite a few guys on our crew that are from Michigan. So I either wear my Notre Dame hat proudly or my Ohio State hat proudly, my Spartan flag flying. So I get the loyalty factor in that discussion. Kevin, I guess one of the questions I want to start asking is are you recruiting different today? We were going to talk a little bit about recruiting. Are you recruiting different today than you did 5 years ago, even 10 years ago?
You know what? So you're asking this obviously in the, it's September 23rd and we're 22 days into this new recruiting class, right? The right. Class of 2022 and in the middle of the pandemic, right? So
let me ask you a better question.
I'm recruiting differently than I did 6 weeks ago.
Right, so, but let me ask you a better question. We'll talk about the pandemic, but are you in this recent era? Are you recruiting a different kind of player than you might have 5 years ago? Is the game collegiately changed at all? And I'm talking about the operation standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're certainly. I've always wanted to have athletes that run up and down the field. That's what we've always tried to do. We've always valued two-way middies, and the riding and clearing game and those kinds of things. I think the game went off course there for a while, and with the importance of the face-off became way overinflated. It's going to be less so with the shot clock because the ability to win a face-off and then hold the ball for as long as you wanted to hold it was just not what our game is supposed to be. And so that affected everything, from the way you recruited to the way you coached and everything else. Now we're getting closer now. We can talk about that at some point if you want. I'm still not a fan of the face-off, just because I think the one good thing the face-off gives you is it gives you the ability to make a run, and it gives you the ability to score quickly at the end of a game, if you're down or something like that. But over the course of a game, I think it way overvalues the possession of the ball, and it just becomes, it's not which team is better, it's which team has the better face-off guy too often, when teams are somewhat equal. So anyway, that's a little sideline, but to the recruiting question, we've always tried to recruit the same kind of guys, and because I want to play an up and down the field game, I want to play an athletic game, and so we're always looking for best athlete at the with the skill to go with it.
You think the sport's gotten more athletic? And I mean that in terms of speed. You think we're playing it faster?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's the profile of our sport is higher than it is, which means higher than it's ever been, and which means that more and more kids are playing and more athletes are playing, right? There's more really good athletes in our sport right now than there's ever been, and so that comes with just making the game a faster, more athletic game.
The Baptistes of the world have obviously learned to dominate that faceoff. And I just want to talk briefly. The Federation is now talking at the high school level, possibly doing alternate possession because of the pandemic as a recourse to keep kids away from each other. And I've read a number of blogs just talking about, sort of an alternate possession like you might in any other sport. Basketball would be the example. Would you be against or for that?
Oh, 100% for it. I would love to see us do that. I think, to my way of thinking, if after a goal you started that 20-second clock, right, and the offense took the ball behind the goal, they take it anywhere below GLE they want to go, which gives them 15 yards of separation if they want 15 yards, or they can stand right at GLE and be a yard away from the riding team. So the clearing team has the ball behind GLE. The riding team has to be above GLE, and that allows you to jump right away into a pressure ride and to force something to move up the field if you wanted to do that. But it also allows the clearing team to put the ball in possession of somebody. If you wanted to punt return the ball out of there with your best midi or whatever, you could try to do that. And I just think it would create more up and down the field, exciting plays, and bring riding and clearing back into the game a little bit, where I'm not a fan of kind of platoon lacrosse, where guys are racing for the box to get that defensive guy on the field or that offensive guy on the field, as opposed to racing down the field to create action. So I don't know. I mean, I love the game in every form, but I just think there's some things we could do with that would make it a little more.
As strong as your 10-man ride is, which you've made famous, if you went to that direction, you'd have a distinct advantage, I would think, because you do such a good job with that ride.
Everybody would have some advantages and some disadvantages, and again, it's always there's always people would spend more time on that area of the game, which would who knows where that would take things.
Now, in relationship to the pandemic, the NCAA in the last couple of days has said that you guys are in the dead period until January. You can obviously have conversations by email and by phone call, but what happens to a coaching staff like yours? Now, you lost Jerry, and now you're kind of replacing some of those coaches that you had before. So what happens? What do you do today that you might not have did last year at this time? What's changed?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is you're not going out and evaluating kids in person. So we sit and watch film of all these events, that people are bringing, and we identify guys and then rewatch the film and then rate them and then rewatch them again. So we're in some ways we're getting a really good look at some of these guys. On the other hand, there's some things that you can't tell on film, and the relative size and speed of guys just doesn't come across on film, right? you can tell he's faster than the guy he's going against. You can't tell how fast either one of those two are,
Right.
and same with size, so you've become reliant, and in some ways recruiting has become almost a throwback, because you've become reliant on the high school and club coaches in a way that you haven't been in the last, call it 10 to 15 years, but that you were 25, 30 years ago. Right. I mean, back then you as a coach, as a college coach, you were working camps and you saw some guys at camp, and you might've seen a guy, you had a chance to work with him for a couple of days at a camp or something. But most of the guys you were recruiting were guys that you hadn't seen hardly at all. Film was almost non-existent when I first started coaching out here, and you had very little of it, for film that you could see anything on.
Sure.
And so you were relying on the relationships that you had within the game, and so you found coaches and people that you trusted, and you took their word for things on guys, and you recruited that way. Well, that's a little bit what we're doing now. I mean, we're having to do more and more of that, because now with really good film, but without being able to be on the field with as many kids, you're having to rely on some of these relationships, and I don't know. And you know what? It's also one of the things that we found with this class is, I think this group really kind of did their homework going into September 1. And I think all of us were maybe a little surprised by how fast the recruiting is gone. I mean, we've got 11 commitments in 22 days. That's unprecedented, I mean, for us to be this far ahead. But I think the kids, I think there are two things at play there. One is they did their homework, and we did our work to create, virtual visits, to create, things that allow somebody to research our program and really kind of take a deep dive into what we do and how we do it and everything else. And I think there's something to be said for the kids just feeling like, I haven't had control of much in my life for the last 6 months. And here comes this decision, this major decision that I have control of, and I'm going to take control and I'm going to do it. And I think we were all surprised at how ready kids were to make some decisions.
Do you think you guys signed kids quicker because maybe the unknown factor of you got to get them signed, or it was because you really feel comfortable enough that you really signed the right guys? Could you
okay, let's distinguish commitments from signing. We haven't signed anybody.
Okay, right.
We're talking about the juniors. But I think, no, I mean, we wouldn't have taken a commitment from anybody we weren't excited about.
Okay.
There's still 2 years to go, and we're going to have to continue to work to retain these guys over those 2 years, but, in general, there's no future in taking a commitment from somebody that you're not excited about taking a commitment from. That's not going to get you anywhere.
Well, I asked the question because if we're in this, we're sort of in this world where we're not really completely sure of everything. Sometimes you jump maybe a little bit quicker, but if they've done their homework, then obviously you know what you're getting. Have you been surprised? You'd always used to be able to find one kid here or find one kid there, but with the mass Zoom and all of the huddles and all the questions, all of the services available, do you get surprised much anymore by a kid who you might show up on a film or show up at a camp? That doesn't really happen much anymore, does it?
I think it still does. Yeah, absolutely it does. And just the fact that, listen, 30 years ago, there was no lacrosse to speak of west of us. Now we've got more kids on our roster from California than we do from Maryland. So, you're surprised because there are kids playing from Seattle to San Diego and from Arizona to Florida and all, everywhere in between. And it's just, you're just seeing kids from places you never would have expected.
Is there a regionalism to players? Is an attack from Long Island, which was always coveted, a different type player from maybe somebody from the Rockies or somebody from California? Or is it pretty much all the same skill set?
I mean, you got to be careful generalizing about any of that. It's really hard. I mean, obviously Peter Baum came from Oregon. He may have been one of the very first Division I players from Oregon, but he was the best player in the country, you know.
Right.
So it's not like there was some straight line to Oregon becoming some pipeline of great players. You know, I mean, he just was a kid who grew up with a unique skill set and ability, and he worked hard and developed himself, and you know, he became a great player, and you know, you can see that guy coming from anywhere now, you know, because the thing about lacrosse is there's so many different skill sets involved. You know, there's the stick skills, there's the athletic skills, and then there's the sense of the game, you know, the IQ, and that can come from a guy who's a great basketball point guard or something else. It doesn't have to just come from playing high level competitive lacrosse. And then there's the things that make a kid stand out: his competitiveness, his ability to learn and process things and add them to his game, and all those kinds of things, that you know, his ability to be a great teammate, those things that distinguish him personally. So with all of that, you know, you can see a guy developing uniquely in any area of the country. That said, you still love a guy from Long Island because you know that from the time he picked up a stick, he had competition, and he had to compete within his, usually just within his town, to be on the field, much less to become one of the better players in that area.
I asked the question because you think of some of the Canadians and certainly some of the natives that are playing the sport, the Thompson brothers. They've got such a different set of skills than maybe what a kid from even the Midwest might have. I'm not saying you can pick a kid out, but it does change. It does change a little bit. I know that there are kids here in the Midwest that are more up and down than sideways in terms of the way they play. But can you measure IQ on film in the kind of thing, or is that one of those things you got to talk to a kid to get a feel for? Because IQ is pretty.
I mean, I think you can watch a guy play and have a good sense of his feel for the game and his IQ, but you also, it's one of the hardest things to develop in a player who doesn't have it. You know, I mean, it's not something that you can say, well, don't worry about it. I know the game. We'll you know, teach it to you in the next 4 months, you know, before the season. It doesn't work like that. And like I say, it's a combination of different things, and it can come from different things. It can come from a kid being a point guard, a quarterback, you know, whatever, a defensive back. I mean, the different skills that a guy can, you know, kind of transitive properties to bring you know, to the game of lacrosse. But at the end of the day, yeah, you have to recognize IQ, I think, and a player has to bring a sense of the game and also an ability to process. That's one of the things that I find the hardest thing to evaluate in a player, but it probably is as important as anything, particularly when you look at a guy coming into a program and does he play right away? Does he contribute right away? Often is so much to do with how quickly does he process information? How quickly can he take something that he's been told, take something that he's been shown, take something that he's seen on film, process it in real time on the field, and then do it, execute it. You know, some guys can do that from the beginning of practice to the end, and some guys that's a year or two process to actually getting to the point where they recognize. And you know, we're in the early parts of our fall ball right now, right? So we're just talking to our guys about general things like, look, in order to make a play, there's almost like 3 different parts of it. First of all, you have to have an understanding of exactly what's called for, right? So you have to be able to say, you have to be able to kind of be able to go to the board and draw it up and say, this is what's supposed to happen. This is where the looks are. This is what you're supposed to do. And that's one piece of it. But if that's all you can do, then you can write a book, but you can't play the game. You have to be able to see it, develop, and have an awareness and an ability to recognize and distinguish every situation from another situation that may be very similar, but that requires something different. And then you have to have the skill to execute that. And then maybe the athleticism to beat the person who's opposing you, who's trying to keep you from doing that, right? So you got these four things that are involved in trying to make one play, and that's where you see guys distinguish themselves as the ones who can do all four of those things. They're great players. The guys who can do three of those four things, they're probably good and can help you. The ones who can't do more than a couple they're challenged.
I'm a high school senior. How do I get on the radar of Notre Dame, or for that matter, any Division I school? We have the services and we have those kinds of things. How many pieces of mail do you get? How many phone calls do you get a week, even at this point?
Don't get much mail anymore. But you get an awful lot of email. I mean, gosh, the number of emails that we get is a little bit overwhelming. We try to look at everything that we get. We try to not necessarily respond to it all, but respond to it internally. With hey, did anybody get a chance to look at those things this kid sent, and what do you think? And then act accordingly. So yeah, it's overwhelming. But for to get back to your, I think, original intent with the question is how does a young man get on our radar? How does he distinguish himself in that mass of emails and things? It starts with providing as much information right up front as you can. I mean, we have to qualify somebody academically. We have to know about their interests. We have to be able to see them play, and even if it's a video clip or whatever, something that intrigues us enough on that. We need to be able to talk to other people about them, so including the information about the people who know them best, their coaches or club coaches or anything, even opposing coaches. And then where are they going to be? Where can we see you? Where can we go? And obviously not during this dead period, but in normal times, where are you going to be where I can get eyes on you and through our staff, get eyes on you. And so, you providing all that information right up front takes away our having to scramble to find any of it. If we are intrigued, if we want to learn more, and you want to do that, you want to make it as easy for the coach as you can. And then persistence, there's a fine line between being a pest, and recognizing that somebody is not interested, but being persistent enough that they, are almost forced to have to take a look.
Does the infamous movie Rudy help or hinder that process?
Hey, Rudy's great advertising for Notre Dame.
Right, but persistence would be he would fall under the definition in the dictionary, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, but that's a guy just showing up.
I get that
thing altogether.
In a percentage, and I'm just ballparking. How many, if you get 100 inquiries, what percentage of that is really people that are looking over their skis? And I say that because I've got a high school defenseman that believes he can play at the Division I level, and he's a really good player, but he's a really good high school player, and he's going to be a really good Division III or Division II. And I don't lie to him about it, but I'm not going to set up interviews at schools of coaches that I know, because I know it's wasting the coach's time. And I think you got to be honest with kids in a sport, for the most part, that has a small margin of folks that are looking for a financial interest and don't necessarily always tell the truth.
Yeah, I don't know that. Yeah, I think there's a lot of places for kids to play, but being realistic about where you can play. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't be aspirational, and see yourself maybe outperforming the thing, but you also have you need to have some faith in the collective wisdom of the people who are around you and the people who are recruiting you. And if consistently you're getting that message from everybody that you're a Division III player, the likelihood is you're probably a Division III player, and you're going to have a hard time doing more than that.
Sometimes limitations just in size and ability that changes those. I'd like to have hair. We'd all have there's various processes that as it works through. I know you can't speculate, but your best guess, you think we'll play this spring?
In some fashion, yes. I'm watching our fall sports do it right now. Talking to our soccer coach yesterday, they're going to play half their games in the fall and half their games in the spring. And, I don't know what it's going to look like. But we're going to play in some fashion, I think.
We're going through a big conversation about masks and helmets, and that's something going on here with both high school and even some of the fall ball lacrosse stuff. And there's not a lot of evidence where you're wearing I ran a junior sailing program this summer, and we had to take the masks off the kids because if they went in the water, it's like being waterboarded. If they fall off a small sailboat, and they suck in, that's it. That's all she wrote. So you have to certainly go with being safe and making sure you follow medical procedures. But I think it's changing. I think this pandemic is changing the sport. I mean, Zoom has changed the way we operate from a communication standpoint. And I think the pandemic will change, I think, a lot of the way we operate. I don't know if that's something you think about or not, but it is, I think, different.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think we're all learning something in this, right? I do think, whether you're talking kind of globally, what we're, how people are learning about how they do their jobs and where they do their jobs and that kind of thing. Or whether you're talking more particularly how we teach, how we share information, how we do those things, how we communicate with each other. Obviously we're all trying to figure that out. I look forward. I like being eyeball to eyeball with guys. I don't like, but when we meet with our team right now, it has to be Zoom or we're out on the field and guys are all spread, out and it's a little more difficult and, you're wearing the mask and all that stuff. Yeah, let's hope we can get back to a time when we don't have to do all this stuff, but we can maybe take some of the best things that we learned from it and apply them to do what we do better.
We're all doing everything outside now. Is Loftus, which is your indoor facility, is it even open at this point?
It is. Yeah. It's a huge, facility. I mean,
Right.
I don't think they're worried about as much, in there, but we'll see. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we'll have to leave the doors open or something. I'm not sure how they'll handle that when we do start going inside.
You're in the middle of fall ball at the moment. You just started it. You're kind of working your way through it. Talk a little bit about this year's Notre Dame team.
Yeah, it's exciting to see our guys out there. But one of the things we're recognizing, even talked about it in our staff meeting this morning, is that these guys are not in the shape that we're used to seeing them in. Last March 11th, they were told they had to, pack up and leave. And even the guys who worked out hard over the summer and did some things, 5 straight months of not playing, of not really being live and competing and those kinds of things means that there's a real adjustment being made right now to guys getting back to doing that. So we're having to take it a little slower than we might like, maybe not go quite as long and quite as hard as we might like, but we'll get there, I think, in time. But I really like our team. I like the guys. They're loving being back on the field more than anything else. It's just so nice to see them get to kind of have the joy of being out there playing and competing every day, and they're loving that. But I think we have a lot of pieces. I think we have a lot of good players that will be, I think, right there again competing at a high level.
Kevin, you've had some background in you've been a color man on various events, and you've been involved in a little bit in the television business. With the exposure of lacrosse, when this is over, do you see yourself, you're very articulate and being a very good spokesman for the sport. I know you've done some things up in Chicago. Do you see yourself maybe doing television when this is over?
Who knows? Who knows when this is over, Craig? Are you trying to tell me it's
No.
No, I'd love to do something like that. It'd be fun to do. And certainly, man, how great is it to see our sport, on TV? I thought this summer, in the midst of everything for the PLL, and even the MLL, they both did a great job of, you know, putting the game out there. And I thought the presentation of the games was terrific. And I think it's really helping our game continue to grow, you know, and all the college games that are on, and now these pro leagues getting on, and it's terrific.
I see some of the lacrosse guys, sideline guys, and color guys who are now doing other sports. Quinn Krasnick's, just a variety of those guys that have moved into other sports. And when they discuss things, well, didn't that guy come from lacrosse? And again, more exposure to the process. They're good sideline reporters, and it doesn't really matter what the sport is. I just think it gives the sport a little bit more notoriety and a little more visibility, if nothing else.
Absolutely.
So, well, listen, I really appreciate your time. I don't want to take up any more of it. Best to you and your family. Hope you stay safe. I know having the field that's behind me, our lot, has got to be a fun place to be every day. So have a great fall. Let's hope we have a very safe winter. And Kevin, I couldn't thank you more for taking the time to talk to us.
Really enjoyed it, Greg. Thanks for calling, and good luck. We'll
Thank
talk
you.
to you soon.
See you soon. Thanks again, Kevin.
Take care.